All right, we're going to go live. And let me just get these channels situated. Okay, just get these channels. Okay, there we go. All right, y'all. Shalom, family. Shalom. I hope everybody's had a good day. And we're going to talk about Amy Klobuchar today. Hopefully we'll get some more people in shortly. It's good to see everybody. All right. Let me just take care of one thing. Let's see here. Okay. All right. I am doing this on 2 separate live streams, so just bear with me. So when I'm going through the article, I may not see all of the activity that's going on. So please forgive me. It's just a little difficult to watch 2 different live stream sessions and get through the article. So if I don't respond to everything, please don't get offended by that. All right. All right. Okay, so we got over 100 people right now, so I'm going to go ahead and get started with what I'm going to talk about, y'all. So shalom to everybody in both chats. Shalom to each and every one of you. So, ladies and gentlemen, Amy Klobuchar was a DA in Minnesota. When she was the DA there, she never prosecuted a single cop the entire time of her tenure as a DA. Not one cop. There were cases of police brutality. There were police shootings. And Amy would not prosecute one single cop. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this woman is a Democrat. This is a Democrat DA doing this to a community of people. And you can best believe the majority of the shootings were Black. And another thing that Amy Klobuchar would do, she would use grand juries so that the hearings on these police officers would never be public. You know, think about Ferguson and Darren Wilson when they used the grand jury. That's what Amy Klobuchar did up in Minnesota, y'all. So she made sure she gave a lot of cover for these cops. And she was heavily endorsed by the police officers there. So that should tell you right there, she was 100% on the cops and never on the side of the citizens that were wrongfully shot and killed by the police officer. Another thing that Amy Klobuchar would do was always believe the cops' account of every situation. She never ever deviated from that. So whatever the cop said in the police report, that's what she chose to believe. She would not believe that these cops would falsify a police report. She never believed it. She always 100% of the time sided with the police officer. Even when his account or her account, oh my goodness, I got the hiccups, y'all, at this moment. Even when the cop's account did not match the evidence of what happened on the scene, she would still take the cop's side. So, ladies and gentlemen, just understand the Democrats hate us as much as the Republican Party do. They hate us. You should see this even in the way that Michael Bloomberg handled the Black citizens in New York. Amy Klobuchar is not really any different than Kamala Harris and how she handled the Black citizens. You can see these Democrats, whether they're Black, white, they are never on our side, ladies and gentlemen. That should be a serious wake-up call for the Black community. Look at Joe Biden when you go back and listen to his old videos when he spoke about the Black community. He always, you always knew he had a sense that we were inferior. We were no good. We were the criminals. That's why he got the nickname Jim Crow Joe. And Bernie Sanders, the only thing he want to do is harp on marching with Dr. Martin Luther King. Well, what have you done for me lately? Don't talk to us about what you did 50 years ago. And you always want to do the kind of things that don't matter at all, or not going to be anything that's going to help progress the Black community. You don't want to do things like that. You want to do things that don't involve money, getting out out in the streets and walking around. That doesn't require any money. And then we have Pete Buttigieg. He's another one. As we go along, we're finding out how much disdain this man had for the Black community in South Bend. If this information don't wake you up about the Democratic Party, nothing will wake you up. And I realize even after getting this information, our people will still be out in the streets marching. Well, Bernie Sanders is full of shit. He signed on to that tough on crime bill. And then he tried to use the excuse there were other bills attached to it. That's a lame excuse. And a very poor excuse on top of that. And then his total disdain for us getting reparations. So The Democratic Party is just turning out to be nothing but the usual white supremacists. That's all you're going to get from Democrats. They do the same thing. They get in office and then they spend their time working against us because this is what makes their white constituency happy. But the problem with the Democrats, their white constituency is not big enough to carry them in an election. They need the Black community in order to win anything. So, that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we really, technically, when it comes down to the Democratic Party, we got all the power. They won't admit it, but it's a fact. There are far more white Republicans than there are Democratic, Democratic voters that are white. So the bottom line is we got all the power. We got the power to help them win, or we can sit things out and make them lose. And we are the only ones that can do this, not the Latinos, not the Asians, not any other group. Us and only us. Never, ever forget that. We got the power when it comes down to the Democratic Party. But the downside is it's been 50 years of nothing for our votes. And they are fighting to keep it that way. But see, now we are in a very much a major awakening is going on among the Black community. And it's getting harder and harder, and they're realizing this. It's getting harder and harder to keep the status quo in place. They can't keep that in place anymore. They can't. They are losing their grip on the community. See, for a long time, the Democratic Party, especially the white Democrats, were confident they could control us. They're not so confident anymore, ladies and gentlemen. They're not. In fact, what's going on is scaring them. You're not going to shame the Black community into voting. You're not going to scare us with the Trump is a racist talk. Why should we worry about Trump being a racist when there are plenty of racists in-house on the Democratic side? And that's all we're finding. So, ladies and gentlemen, do not believe when it comes down to racism that there are any distinctions between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, because there are no differences when it comes down to racism. The Democrats, they just do it in a covert way. They're covert with it. See, they can come smile in front of us and make you believe they are with us. But behind the scenes, when they get into their political office, they spend the entire time working against us. And we are seeing this in all of their political records. There's no one on the stage that got a record of working with us, and they can show that record of working with us. None of them have that. Elizabeth Warren said a check for what? And then not long after that, she proceeded to give reparations to LGBTQ. There is no one with us in the Democratic Party. And the sooner we realize this, the better off we will be. There are no candidates with us. There are no candidates that get into office and work on our agenda. They have showed us this year after year. We have devoted our vote to very unworthy people, very undeserving people, people that never had our best interests at heart, people that are very much like their forefathers when it comes down to how they feel about us. So, ladies and gentlemen, I wish I could say something better, but I simply can't. And I think we have lived with the lies long enough. And we have to face the fact that this is our reality, not some fairy tale that these politicians are standing in front of us and saying, this is it. So it's a truth that we must face, no matter how difficult it is. We must deal with it. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. There is an article I would like to share with each and every one of you. All right, let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, before I get started, I just want to make sure you all can see my screen. Just give me a 1 if you can see my screen, and then I'll go ahead and get started. Just give me a 1. Okay, wonderful. Okay, everybody. Okay. This is an article that came out on apmreports.org. And this article came out March 25th, 2019. So this is something that has been known about Amy Klobuchar for a long time. Okay, this is a known thing about this woman. So she put an innocent Black teenager in jail for killing an 11-year-old, and he never committed the crime. See, any bad thing about us, Amy Klobuchar is the type of person that's willing to believe it 100%. So that just go to show you what kind of character this woman really truly has. Klobuchar didn't prosecute controversial police killings or brutality cases as a county attorney. So she was a DA. Violence was a dark feature of law enforcement in Minnesota's largest county 20 years ago. Amy Klobuchar saw it firsthand as the Hennepin County attorney, though she kept a distance. Over 8 years, beginning in 1999, the city of Minneapolis paid $4.8 million in legal settlements related to 122 police misconduct. So these are police brutality incidents where the cops just went completely overboard. Okay, 122 police brutality incidents under the watch of Amy Klobuchar. A police officer, and there were a total of 29 fatalities. So this is where cops shot citizens under the watch of Amy Klobuchar. So 122 police brutality cases, 29 shootings that resulted in a death. Klobuchar, however, chose not to criminally charge any fatalities involving law enforcement. So she would not prosecute a single cop. Not one. But the liberals want you to believe they are something different from the Republicans. Don't sound very different to me. So she was fine with police officers in her county being out there brutalizing and killing civilians. She was fine with it. And many of these civilians, ladies and gentlemen, were Black. She didn't give a damn. She was only concerned about protecting the cops. Klobuchar, however, chose not to criminally charge any fatalities involving law enforcement. Instead, she routinely put the decision to a grand jury. So when using a grand jury, ladies and gentlemen, that means the public can now not see this trial. This trial is now held in secrecy. This is what she did. Some of the parents of the shooting victims told Amy Klobuchar they wanted the case to be out in the open. She never granted them what they wanted. She continued to use grand juries and keep the entire trial behind closed doors. This is what she did. Klobuchar also didn't take on any of the misconduct claims. The mother of a Black teenager who was shot and killed by police in 2004 begged Klobuchar to file charges against the officer instead of presenting the case to a grand jury. And see, grand juries, especially if they're predominantly white, ladies and gentlemen, you should remember this from Darren Wilson. Whenever the grand jury is predominantly white, they're going to let that cop walk. That's why Klobuchar was using the grand jury. She knew the grand jury would be stacked up with white people. And white people do not want to convict cops. That's why she turned to the grand jury, y'all. I see through this whole thing like a glass of water. So when Amy Klobuchar is in a position of power, she uses that power against the Black community, just like many of her counterparts in political office. So never say the Democratic Party, they are different. They're not. They're not. The grand jury is a way of hiding that the prosecutor is not giving the full information of guilt to the grand jury. Tahisha Williams Brewer wrote to Klobuchar. So this was her son that got killed. I want this process out in the open where everyone can observe it and make sure that it is fair to my son. Klobuchar did not directly respond to Williams Brewer and proceeded to present the case to a grand jury, which found the shooting was justified. Isn't that what happens all the time in America? See, this is why I was telling you before there should be no all-white juries or predominantly white juries in America, because you're going to still get the Jim Crow result. That's what you're going to get. Two years earlier, a riot broke out in the predominantly Black Jordan neighborhood in North Minneapolis after police accidentally shot an African-American boy during a drug raid. Anger rose and trust fell quickly between law enforcement and minority communities. A federal mediator quickly arrived to try to calm tensions. Klobuchar, she's the DA at this time, didn't get involved. When the people were out there rioting, she said absolutely nothing. She did absolutely nothing. This woman believes we should be voting for her to be president with this track record. This is what she believes. I think there was a significant amount of indifference on her part with regards to the problems facing the Native American and African American community, said Ron Edwards, a longtime civil rights activist who served on the Police Relations Council created through the federal mediation process. As Klobuchar, a U.S. senator from Minnesota, begins a run for president, her past decisions to not use the power of her office to punish bad cops or stand up for the community she otherwise protected, with contrast with a more progressive Democratic electorate calling for greater police accountability. She didn't ask for any accountability from cops at all. But see, Amy Klobuchar is representative of what white Democrats are like in this country. They talk a good game, but their record don't look any different from a Republican. She shouldn't even be on the panel of the 2020 candidates with this kind of track record. She shouldn't even be there. But see, people like her get away with so much, y'all. They just do. In America, they get away with so much. And there's never any consequences for this. It is praised. And that's sick. You know, the fact that we even have to look at this person and hear her in debates and listen to her opinion, which she came out very strong in opposing reparations. But looking at her track record, you can understand why she did that. She don't believe we deserve reparations, but she was all for programs. I don't want improvements from a people that have showed disdain for us. I don't want programs from a group of people that have showed so much disdain for us. Why would I want those things from these people? Like we said, cut the damn check. And Amy Klobuchar's career is showing us more evidence on why we deserve those reparations. Diverse voters, a critical bloc for Democrats and African Americans in particular, are scrutinized. They're scrutinizing the candidate's position on race-based issues, and we should, because every single candidate got a bad track record. Everyone. They should be scrutinized. They got horrible track records, including criminal justice. As one of two prosecutors in the race for president, U.S. Senator Kamala Harris, and we saw how horrible her record was. Shit, when it came time to releasing prisoners, she wanted to keep them in there to do the prison work. And she was another one stacking all the black men in prison on low-level offenses and giving them these astronomical sentences. U.S. Senator Kamala Harris from California is the other. Klobuchar has an extensive record of prosecution, sentencing, and law enforcement priorities. Her legislative record actually matches her record when she was a DA, y'all. So she became a senator and continued to work against us. This is a Democrat who claims, oh no, that they're better than the Republican Party. No, the only difference is the Republicans are out in the open with their racism and you're covert with it. But at the end of the day, it's still the same racism. Because when you get in office, you work against us. That's what makes both parties the same. Her legislative record today regarding criminal justice matters could be interpreted as an extension of her past. It shows little leadership on efforts to make the criminal justice system fairer. Of the 6 U.S. senators running for president, Klobuchar has introduced the fewest criminal justice reform bills since the protest over a police shooting in Ferguson, Missouri in 2014, an alarming event that sparked a nationwide focus on police accountability. So since her days of being a DA all the way up until the time she has been a senator, she has not changed her position at all. Not at all. It gives me pause in thinking about her potentially becoming the next president of the United States, said Nakima Levi Armstrong, a lawyer and former president of the Minneapolis NAACP. As for the past, Levi Armstrong says it's important for someone like Amy Klobuchar to acknowledge the mistakes that she made and the harm that she caused and to make amends. But see, ladies and gentlemen, that's where we got to change our thinking. She didn't make no mistakes in office. She didn't make any mistakes. She did exactly what a white supremacist would do. She did not make any mistakes in office. When they do all of these things in office, these are not mistakes, y'all. And that's what we got to stop believing. Oh, well, she made mistakes. No, she did deliberate acts. And to this very day, she has expressed no regret for the way she carried out her job as a DA. So therefore, these were not mistakes at all. When Klobuchar was a county prosecutor from 1999 to 2007, Black Lives Matter did not exist. There weren't body cameras or cell phone videos, and cops were rarely prosecuted. They were never prosecuted when she was the DA. They were never prosecuted. Klobuchar's reliance on grand juries was in step with her peers nationwide. So this just go to show you, this is what many prosecutors do across the country, y'all. This is so they don't have to expose the offending cop. And she positioned herself politically as a tough on crime and a friend of the police. See, you can't be a friend to the police and you claim you're helping the Black community. It's either one or the other. And she chose to always be on the side of the police 100% of the time. That's what her record shows. Okay. During Klobuchar's campaign for prosecutor in 1998, Minneapolis police union leaders enthusiastically supported her during her campaign kickoff. The union backed her that year and in 2002. Records of how much money the union spent on Klobuchar's behalf in those races no longer exist. They don't want you to see what they donated to her. And you can best believe it was probably a few $1,000,000. No, they don't want to disclose what the police union gave her to keep her mouth shut the entire time she was a DA or going against them. So because they donated so much to her, she never made them be accountable. Not even once. Michelle Gross, the founder of Communities United Against Police Brutality in Minneapolis, said Klobuchar routinely sided with police on issues involving police misconduct. We really could not get her to pay attention to the issue of police brutality or even the issue of racial disparities in the criminal justice system, she said. One civil rights advocate, Ian Bethel, said Klobuchar connected with minority groups, created relationships, and was accessible. And while she certainly wasn't to blame for the problems with Minneapolis police, Klobuchar fell short, said Bethel, a minister at an African-American church who was involved in the federal mediation between Minneapolis police and minority communities. Were we happy with what she could produce? No. I can say that 100%. So this is what one of the ministers are saying. In the past year, Klobuchar, 58, acknowledged that there is racism in the criminal justice system. Now, listen to this, y'all. She acknowledges this, and she's a lawmaker now. She can put pen to paper and do something about this as a senator, but she chooses not to. Never forget that. She is a lawmaker, and she chooses not to do anything to change this imbalanced system. At a recent CNN town meeting, she emphasized that she's been working on racial justice issues her entire life. Really? Really? How come that doesn't show in your record as a DA, Amy Klobuchar? Including efforts to diversify her office and measures to improve witness identification. Klobuchar wouldn't be interviewed for this story, responding instead to email questions with written statements. She did not answer questions about the death of Williams Brewer's son or the mother plea for her not to rely on a grand jury. Klobuchar also didn't address how she handled specific cases of police misconduct or her lack of involvement in federal mediation. No, Klobuchar is part of the problem, ladies and gentlemen. She's part of the problem of what's wrong with criminal justice in America. Criminal justice for the Black community was written out around the same time they came up with the 13th Amendment. And they came up with the Black codes. So they already had their roadmap on who was going to go to jail the most in this country, and that was the Black community. They already had their roadmap on how we were get treated in the criminal justice system. And they said they put people in place, and I did this on my podcast, if you were listening to the one I did on understanding Jim Crow. They put people in place to make sure we can never win in the criminal justice system. We can never win in court. They make sure they put the kind of people, judges, prosecutors, jurors, that will never allow us to win in their system. So therefore, we are still living through Jim Crow, very much. One civil rights advocate, now I did read that part, let me go down, I'm jumping back up. All right, so in her responses, Klobuchar highlighted her efforts to crack down on crime, but acknowledged some of her actions may have harmed parts of the community. No, it did. It did. It did. I don't have a perfect record, but I promise you, every single day in that job, I tried to put myself in other people's shoes to try to do the right thing, Klobuchar said. Okay, so always working against the Black community and siding with cops, you call that putting yourself in someone's shoes? Ooh, this woman got some issues. A mother urges accountability. Police shot and killed 25 people, and 4 people died in custody while Klobuchar was the chief prosecutor of Minnesota's largest county. She sent all but one case to a grand jury, and none were charged. So no cop was charged. Not one. Under Amy Klobuchar's watch, not one cop. A review of the deaths found that a majority were not controversial, but there were at least 2 instances in which families and activists questioned Klobuchar's decision to present the cases to a grand jury. Now, this picture that you're looking at, this is Courtney Williams. Courtney Williams was killed by a police. His family continues to question why their 15-year-old son had to die. Now, they said from the way the bullet wounds went into his body, he was clearly holding up his arms in the air when he was shot. He was not resisting. He was not putting up a struggle. He was cooperating. He was shot in the head and he was shot in the upper arm. And the family is still trying to fight for justice that they absolutely could not get under Amy Klobuchar. You damn right her ass needs to be dragged for all of this. Now, let me just give you some more insight on this case about Courtney Williams. In 2004, the African-American teenager was shot by a Minneapolis police officer. The officer claimed he shot Williams because the teenager pointed a gun at him during a chase. And I want you to listen to the details of this. It was a pellet gun was found at the scene, but Williams' family doesn't believe Williams was holding the gun when he was shot. We had questions about the official story that Courtney was pointing a gun, said Ella Davis Shuggs, Williams' aunt. Shuggs said the family became suspicious after seeing coroner photos that seemed to conflict with the police department's account. So what the cop wrote in the report and what they saw on the body did not match. But Klobuchar sided with the police officer anyway. They said the picture showed Williams was shot in the shoulder and head, leading them to believe he may have been raising his arms to surrender. They also said Williams' fingerprints were found only on the barrel of the pellet gun, not the handle or trigger. She believed the cop. In her letter to Klobuchar, Williams' mother not only urged transparency and fairness, she wanted Klobuchar to take charge, prosecute this man, and make that decision yourself, and then be accountable to the people for it, Williams Brewer wrote. She said she was worried that Klobuchar's office was too close to Minneapolis police and would give jurors only the police department's version of events. And that's exactly what Klobuchar did. That's what she did. Williams Brewer said Klobuchar never directly responded to the family's request. Klobuchar presented that Williams case to the grand jury, and this is exactly what the mother did not want. She did not want this to go to the grand jury. She completely disregarded what this Black mother wanted and gave the case to a grand jury any damn way. She did not care about this woman or her son. Klobuchar presented the Williams case to the grand jury. 4 months after the shooting, it ruled that the officer's use of force was justified, a conclusion the police had also reached. So the police reached this conclusion because you know what cops come up with when they investigate themselves? Nothing. Okay. The offending cop is always right, no matter what. Even if he lied on the police report, he's still right. Wow. Suggs said she believes Klobuchar should have made the charging decision herself. There might have been a different outcome. She might have been able to encourage people to dig a little deeper, she said, but she didn't want to do that because she wanted to use that grand jury to ensure that the police officer would get off. They're not going to let a lot of us in the Black community on those grand juries, ladies and gentlemen. They're not. They're not. Members of the Police Community Relations Council, a body formed by the city to help ease tensions. See, they're not trying to correct the situation. They're just trying to pacify the Black community. You can easily see that. We're divided on the grand jury's ruling. After reviewing police accounts and talking with the family and activists, some council members found the shooting justified and others sided with the family. The city of Minneapolis and Tahisha Williams Brewer reached a settlement. Listen to this settlement, y'all. This is such a disgrace. Of $20,000 in 2013 for the death of her son. For the death of her son, y'all. $20,000. She said the money paid for her son's burial and tombstone. Her other children received $1,000 each. That was the settlement for a wrongful death. That was it, $20,000. That's it, $20K. All under Amy Klobuchar's watch. That's all they offered this Black family, $20,000. Neck hold death was justifiable homicide. The Williams case wasn't the only instance in which community groups lobbied Klobuchar to avoid using a grand jury. Gross, the founder of Communities United Against Police Brutality, said the group protested outside of Klobuchar's office in 2002 on behalf of Christopher Burns, who died after a police officer tried to restrain him. Police went to Burns' house on a domestic disturbance call and put him in a neck hold. Police said that Burns resisted arrest. You know, when it comes down to Black people, we're always resisting. You know how it is. Was thrashing around and was difficult to control. The Hennepin County medical examiner ruled the death a homicide. Klobuchar presented the case to a grand jury, which ruled it a justifiable homicide. Okay, so I think we're all getting the picture. She loved the grand jury because she knew they would be mostly white. Okay, I mean, let's face it. A civil suit filed by Burns' fiance claimed that the officer used an unnecessary amount of force. The suit resulted in a $300,000 settlement with the city of Minneapolis. Even that's nothing. That's nothing. $300,000? The critics of the grand jury system say it gives prosecutors political cover to not prosecute police officers. That's right, because technically, I mean, just think about Darren Wilson. When they used a grand jury, he was not technically being prosecuted. And this is what Amy Klobuchar used each and every time to make it look like, it looked like she was doing something, but she actually was not. Klobuchar and others have argued that a grand jury removes a potential conflict of interest between prosecutors and police because it allows a group of independent citizens to decide whether to file charges. So, in other words, she didn't want any conflict with the cops that had given her some big political money. I mean, she's not fooling no damn body. She's not fooling no one. So, so when the police endorsed her and gave her all this money, this is what she decided to do. That way, she never had to go against the police or prosecute them. Use the grand jury. That way, the police and I are never going against each other. Ooh, this woman is no good. She is definitely no good. Okay. A grand jury, however, doesn't hear challenges to the evidence that a prosecutor presents, which leaves it strongly under the influence of one set of facts. So that's only the cop's account of what happened and nothing else. Nothing else. This is why whenever we hear the words grand jury in a police case, you can best believe there will be no conviction at all. None. And see, Klobuchar, she thinks she's slick by doing this. The average citizen is not going to see this on the surface at all. Klobuchar advocated for grand juries in an interview with Minnesota Public Radio in 2002. It's something that we think is important for the community, that when the police shoot someone and someone is killed, that the case is reviewed by citizens out of the community to determine whether or not criminal charges should be brought, she said. Her successor as Hennepin County Attorney Mike Freeman ended the practice of presenting officer-involved shootings to a grand jury in 2016, citing the accountability and transparency limitations of the grand jury system. He made the decision after civil rights groups worried a grand jury would opt against charging a Minneapolis police officer who shot and killed Jamar Clark in 2015. So Klobuchar rode the hell out of the grand jury. It wasn't until 2016 somebody that came in with some damn common sense got away from the grand jury, because that grand jury allowed no accountability from the police officers. They didn't have to worry about, as soon as you say grand jury, the cop already know they're scot-free. They have nothing to worry about at that point. Freeman eventually declined to charge the officers involved in the shooting. He is currently prosecuting the Minneapolis police officer who shot and killed Justine Damon Rusick. Right? So this article came out before that trial, and we know what happened. Muhammad Noor got 12 years. You know, isn't it amazing how when a black cop does the shooting, they know how to bring a cop to justice? You notice that? But when a white cop shoots somebody, they don't know what the hell that is. They don't know what justice is. Isn't that amazing? This is a disgrace. In her email statements, Klobuchar said she's supportive of these recent efforts and is working to make sure our criminal justice system actually delivers justice for all. She's a damn liar. She didn't even make sure there was justice for all when she was a DA. She's a damn liar. You know, they don't want this system to change, ladies and gentlemen. It don't take all this time to change a system. They've been running the system like this since 1865, and they have not deviated from this system once. They're not interested in changing anything. I think we all know that by now. Tahisha Williams Brewer said she's glad Klobuchar and prosecutors are now willing to be more transparent. I don't know why she's glad about Klobuchar. Klobuchar screwed her over, screwed her and her family over. See, this is where some of our people are lost. Man, we are lost. We are so lost. Those families who did get justice, I'm glad for them, and I wish it could have happened for me, but I didn't get any justice, she said. You sure didn't. And Klobuchar was the one that screwed you over. A riot mediation, no Klobuchar. Klobuchar was elected Hennepin County attorney at a tense time for Minneapolis law enforcement. City, county, and state officials were under pressure to get crime under control, especially after the reaction to the city's sky-high murder rate in 1995, 27.1 killings per 100,000 people, earning it the nickname Murderapolis. Damn. Klobuchar got aggressive. She pledged to increase the prosecution of juveniles, criminals with multiple felonies and gun crimes, while praising New York City's broken windows approach to prosecute low-level offenses, a measure that criminal justice experts now say unfairly targeted minority communities, and that's exactly what she did. So she just mirrored what New York City was doing, you know, marijuana, you know, these low-level drug offenses. She was stacking them in prison. Does this sound like Democrats are different from Republicans? It's all the same. How could it be different? These people are all from within the same group. So how could it possibly be different? But as law enforcement increased efforts to prevent crime, there was growing frustration with how forcefully police were treating African Americans, particularly in North Minneapolis. The approach cost the city millions to settle misconduct claims. The riot in 2002, which occurred in a predominantly African-American neighborhood in Minneapolis, had been the latest flashpoint between police and minority communities. They were at an impasse over the best way to address allegations of police misconduct, which the department investigated internally. So, that's a waste of time. Police departments investigating themselves is a joke. A month before the riots, a police officer and a citizen were shot and killed during a gunfight. And just 2 weeks before the riot, white police officers shot a young African-American man who allegedly was carrying a gun. Okay, well, they always act like there's some problem with us having guns. I guess they fear retribution for all of the stuff they've done to us. There are many legal Black gun carriers in this country, but they just go over the top paranoid whenever a Black man got a gun. An angry crowd gathered after the shooting to complain that police were targeting African Americans. Bethel said groups in North Minneapolis were warned police officials that the community was upset with recent police actions. He said police officials were dismissive. We told them that this was going to be a tinderbox, and the tinderbox happened, Bethel said. The riots started on a hot August night while Minneapolis police served a search warrant to a house. They said that officers were forced to shoot an attacking dog, and bullet fragments struck a young boy. News of the incident drove about 100 people to the streets, claiming that police intentionally shot the boy. The riot, which lasted a few hours, resulted in injuries to several people, including 3 journalists. A bus was damaged and several cars were set on fire. Martin Luther King said riots is the voice of the unheard. The shooting and unrest prompted another round of calls for the city to adopt greater police accountability measures. A federal mediator arrived to help facilitate the discussions. City leaders were heavily involved in the talks. Klobuchar, who served as one of the county's top law enforcement officials, was not directly involved, and her office didn't play a formal role in the talks, according to the Hennepin County Attorney's Office. You know why she didn't get involved with the talks? Because she didn't want to go against the cops that funded her campaign and supported her. That's why she didn't even get involved in talks after a riot in her county. Does that even sound right? It's almost like the further we go along, the worse it gets. For some critics, her absence now represents another example of her lack of interest in police misconduct. That's exactly what it was. I never saw her at any engagement in that process whatsoever, said Gross, who was involved in the early discussions with the mediator. The county attorney's office has no formal role and does not see cases unless they're forwarded by the police department. You hear this bullshit? Oh, this woman. Wow. This woman was a diehard for the police. She was diehard. Wow. Nothing, however, prevented Klobuchar from requesting additional details from high-profile cases and costly settlements. It isn't clear if Klobuchar made those efforts and her campaign did not respond to questions about it. A week after the riots, Klobuchar was asked directly about police brutality in Minneapolis. In the end, we also have to enforce the law, even if it involves a police officer, she told Minnesota Public Radio. I'm very impressed by the work that the mayor is trying to do, that the chief is trying to do, that the community groups in the Jordan neighborhood and others are trying to do to keep that trust. Because in the end, if that trust breaks down, the people in the neighborhoods are hurt the most. Nobody was trusting her even back then. What the hell is this woman talking about? There were no trust in her. They were complaining about her. The mediated agreement signed in 2003 listed more than 100 action items, including recommendation on officer training, use of force policy, and the department investigate use of force incidents. It also led to the creation of the Police Community Relations Council. Those are not the reasons why cops are shooting people. It's all about race. All of those things. It's not a training issue, y'all. I wish people would get off of that. They say that even to this very day. You know, even Botham Jean's family said that's it, that ignorant shit. Oh, it's training. No, it isn't. These cops don't have no training issue out here. Are you kidding me? Wow, I wish we would stop saying stuff like that, for real. Bethel, who co-chaired the council for the last few years of the 5 it was in existence. He said he doesn't remember Klobuchar participating in the mediation, but does remember representatives from her office at the meetings. Former Minneapolis City Council member Barb Johnson also said she doesn't remember Klobuchar taking part in the discussions, but she said it was the responsibility of Minneapolis city leaders, not the county attorney, to address concerns about police misconduct and to repair rifts between the department and communities of color. Klobuchar did not answer questions on her role in federal mediation. She said the biggest concern she heard from the public was related to crime. When I first came into office, the major thing I heard from the African American community, bar none, was there was a bunch of their kids were killed by gangsters. We simply went in and did our job, she said. Trust me, cops are killing people in this country a hell of a lot more than street gangs. Okay, that's a fact. Little political upside taking on cops. Police shootings were not considered a national issue when Klobuchar was a prosecutor. A review of media reports between 1998 and 2006 shows only a handful of instances in which a prosecutor charged a police officer for killing someone or engaging in violent misconduct. No, what it means is you chose not to go after cops, and you still choose not to go after cops in 2020. Very few of these cops are being jailed for shooting unarmed people that were no threats to them. Nonetheless, experts in police behavior and political analysis say Klobuchar's record on police misconduct should be scrutinized as she campaigns for president. Philip Stinson, with the Police Integrity Research Group at Bowling Green State University in Ohio, said prosecutors and the public have historically believed a police officer's explanation of events, but that changed after the protest in Ferguson. Prosecutors today might be a little bit more skeptical in their willingness to automatically accept the police version of events, Stinson says. I don't agree with that. This dude right here is Philip Stinson. I don't agree with that. I think many cases, in the majority of the time, these prosecutors still side with cops. And we certainly see that when their dealings is with the Black community. You'd have to look at it through that lens. No, I don't. No, I don't. I have to look at it through that lens, but look at who that is coming from. Enough said. Klobuchar's inaction was typical. District and county attorneys charging police officers was and still is uncommon, though police brutality was familiar, especially after the videotape of 1991 beating of Rodney King. The officers involved were acquitted of assault and excessive force, and a 6-day riot followed in which 63 people were killed. I remember that, boy. Woo, I remember that. Between 2001 and 2005, Los Angeles County District Attorney Steve Cooley did not bring a criminal case against anyone involved in the city's 442 police shootings, according to the Los Angeles Times. Wow. But see, that is really the norm with prosecutors across this country. They have records of not taking down one cop. That's more common than uncommon. Only 3 of 314 alleged excessive force cases examined during the same time resulted in criminal charges. And in Chicago, a 2007 investigation found that Cook County State Attorney Richard Devine had not charged any on-duty officers with shooting a civilian, according to the Chicago Tribune. See? So I'm sure if we went through prosecutors across this country, you will see many of them with a track record of not prosecuting even one single cop. In Milwaukee, Wisconsin, largest county, the district attorney in 2004 was Michael E. McCann, and he had fought relationship with the Milwaukee Police Department and its union. That year, he charged 3 officers in a high-profile brutality case involving their off-duty actions. A jury acquitted them, but they later faced federal charges and struck a plea deal. In 2005, McCann also charged 1 officer with homicide for the shooting a civilian while off duty. The officer committed suicide shortly after being charged. In both cases, McCann said he faced harsh criticisms and calls to resign by the police union. Yeah, if you're not with the police union, yeah, you need to get out of office. You can only stay if you're for them. His analysis is blunt. There's little political upside for a prosecutor to take a public stance on police misconduct cases. So he's telling you the truth. The reason why these prosecutors do not take on police forces because there's very little political gain for them to do so. So he's pretty much letting you know it's better to side with the cop politically than to go against them. That's why they all do it. Being too aggressive lead to problems with the city's police unions, but failing to act can lead to blowback from the community. It can have a measurably pejorative impact on your electoral possibilities, and it doesn't often add much to it, McCann says. Klobuchar lags on police accountability. As she campaigns for president, Klobuchar has been touting her record as a prosecutor, which is horrible, horrible record. At campaign stops and in media interviews, she typically says she does her job without fear or favor. As a U.S. Senator, and did so too when she was a Hennepin County attorney. So, in other words, Klobuchar, you did nothing as a prosecutor and you do absolutely nothing as a senator. That's how I interpret it. She used her prosecutorial career to build her statewide profile. She spoke in favor of hate crime legislation at the White House in 2000. She prosecuted several cases involving white-collar crime and successfully lobbied to toughen penalties for repeat drunk driving offenders. Those efforts helped springboard her to the U.S. Senate after winning the 2006 election. Wow. It's a shame the Black community did not come together to shut her down, but hey, it is what it is. After about her prosecutorial record on race, Klobuchar quickly highlights her efforts to require police to videotape witness interrogations and change how witnesses identify suspects, and her attempts to diversify her office. Those things are nothing. Those things are nothing. Those things are absolutely nothing. However, the disproportionate number of minorities she sent to state prison isn't a campaign talking point. Nearly 2/3 of the Hennepin County residents sent to state prison by Klobuchar and her deputies were African American, according to data from the Minnesota Department of Corrections. That came during a period when African Americans made up about 10% of the county's population, according to U.S. Census data. So she spent her time in office targeting the Black community. That's all she did. She spent her entire time targeting Black people. How can they be 10%, but 2/3 of them went to jail? Teresa Nelson with the ACLU of Minnesota said Klobuchar showed no interest in improving racial justice issues or prosecuting police misconduct. I don't know that I've ever heard her really talking about race and mass incarceration and the racial disparities that we have here in Minnesota and around the country in our criminal justice system, Nelson said. So Amy Klobuchar spent her entire time as a DA mass incarcerating Black men and women and letting the police off 100% of the time. That's what she did in her career as a DA. She and others say Klobuchar needs to explain her record as prosecutor and whether racial equity in the criminal justice system would be a priority if she became president. Hell no. If she's not doing this as a senator, she definitely is not going to do this as president, y'all. It would be the same old, same old. During a U.S. Senate hearing in 2014 that focused on civil rights, In the months after the protest in Ferguson, Klobuchar reinforced her faith in the grand jury system. Did you see that? Does she sound like she's trying to change a system? She's trying to keep this grand jury shit in place. She's not trying to change nothing. Now, she said this as a senator. Her position came despite withering criticism nationwide that the prosecutor in Ferguson had used the grand jury to avoid charging the officer, Darren Wilson, who shot an unarmed man, Mike Brown. Many witnesses and senators at the hearing focused on efforts to reduce racial profiling and police brutality and to make changes in prison sentencing. But Klobuchar chose to talk about a bill she wrote that would allow for some same-day voter registration, reasoning that increasing voter access will ensure greater diversity on grand juries. So she was not even interested in even talking about racial profiling and police brutality. She jumped onto a whole different subject. Wow. When you limit who can vote, you actually also limit who can serve on grand juries, because that's where you get your source for people who can serve on grand juries, Klobuchar said in December 2014, which was not that long ago. 2 years later, Klobuchar again took care with her words after the high-profile shooting death of Philando Castile, who was shot dead by a police officer during a traffic stop in Falcon Heights, Minnesota. While many other Minnesota politicians publicly condemned the killing, Klobuchar demurred. In a written statement, she called for a full investigation and for doing more to ensure accountability and trust between our law enforcement and communities they serve. So she just wrote a bullshit statement. She didn't take no action, y'all. So when Philando Castile was killed, the state senator wrote some lame-ass statement and took no action. This woman should not be in charge of a dog pound. Wow. This is just painful to even, this is painful, y'all. This shit is painful. In the days after the shooting, Klobuchar called for unity during a speech on the Senate floor. The carefully crafted presentation expressed sympathy for Castile's, along with police officers who were shot and killed in Dallas a day after Castile's death. She also criticized Minnesota's protesters who shut down freeways and targeted police after Castile's death. So she didn't reprimand the cop for shooting Philando. She reprimanded the protesters. This woman needs to be ran out of town. America is better than Philando Castile losing his life and a 2-year-old in Minneapolis losing his life in a drive-by shooting, said Klobuchar, referring to a shooting in North Minneapolis in which 2 children were shot, one of whom died. And America is better than throwing concrete chunks at a police officer in St. Paul and 5 Dallas cops being taken from the beat forever, Klobuchar said. Again, showing no concern for the deceased. Her speech also called for criminal justice reform, including increased use of police body cameras, which we know they still lie even when the body camera is rolling. Diversity in hiring and training, and for strengthening gun control laws. But Klobuchar's record shows she has not been a forceful advocate for criminal justice reform during her 12 years in the Senate. Since the riots in Ferguson, Klobuchar has sponsored or co-sponsored only 9 bills intended to make the system fairer, including efforts to reduce prison sentences and increase funding for police de-escalation training. It was the fewest of any U.S. senator running for president. By comparison, during the same period, Cory Booker of New Jersey, who has been in the Senate since 2013, has sponsored or co-sponsored 33 bills. So he actually sponsored more criminal reform bills than Amy Klobuchar, and she's been in office for 12 years. Woo! This is a disgrace, y'all. Let me see what this is. Okay, so they're showing you each one of their records. So Cory Booker co-sponsored 33 bills that had something to do with criminal justice reform. Kirsten Gillibrand, 21. Kamala Harris, 12. Amy Klobuchar, 9. Bernie Sanders, 12. And Elizabeth Warren, 16. So Amy Klobuchar, she got a sorry record as a senator too. Klobuchar points out that she was an original co-sponsor of a major bill that overhauled the criminal justice system by reducing prison sentences and aiming to prevent ex-felons from offending again. It was signed into law last year. Her campaign also said she advocated for drug court and a broad bill dealing with substance abuse prevention. That's because the drug addicts look like her. So she's all for drug court, because see, drug court means they don't have to go to jail. They don't have to worry about mass incarcerating opioid addicts. Wow. And while sponsoring legislation is not the only role of a senator, it highlights their priorities. She has not signed on to bills that end the use of solitary confinement, prohibit racial profiling by police, and end the practice of cash bail for offenders, measures presidential opponents have supported. So she's not interested in making any changes, especially that's going to help the Black community. She's not for that at all. Those who lobby on behalf of making the criminal justice system fairer say Klobuchar's prosecutorial record is important and relevant. However, there's more interest in how Klobuchar is explaining her record today. She's not. She's trying to avoid it. If you watched her recently, she gets mad if it's even brought up. She don't want to explain her record. I would be more interested in what she says now about what she did then, because I also think part of a professional life is learning from experience and changing views over time, said Rachel Bartal, the law professor at NYU, a former member of the United States Sentencing Commission. She added that it's unfair to judge her by today's prosecution standards because what's commonly important today wasn't on the minds of prosecutors when Klobuchar was serving. That's a lame excuse. Even if the standards of today did not exist, this woman knew what right and wrong was. Okay. And she knew that if she sat in office and dealt with the Black community more harshly than anyone else, she would clearly get away with that. So, no, I don't agree with what this person said. Klobuchar has recently suggested she could have done more as prosecutor, but offered few specifics beyond looking at drug crime sentences to ensure fairness related to race. You can always do better, she told CNN this month. You learn in retrospect. When you look back on things, you can do better. This woman didn't do anything better, and she's not even doing better as a senator. So she has no business even being in political office with her track record. This woman has, I don't know who went out and voted for this woman and put her in the Senate for the last 12 years. I don't know. Something is definitely wrong up in Minnesota. But, ladies and gentlemen, this is the track record of Amy Klobuchar. This is somebody in the Democratic Party. And it just goes to show you she is no different when it comes down to dealing with the Black community than any Republican. It's absolutely the same. There is nothing different in the way she handled things as a prosecutor and a Republican prosecutor. It's exactly the same. Now I understand why the NAACP recently demanded that Amy Klobuchar withdraw her bid for the presidency. Now I understand. We got a clear picture on why they were making that demand. But my problem is how the Minnesota voters allowed this woman to even be a senator after such a poor record as a prosecutor. See, you can do a half-assed job in criminal justice and still make it into political office. Only in America, y'all. Only in America. But those of you that were done wrong in Minnesota, you definitely, I agree with that. The CA007, they need to speak up about Amy Klobuchar and her conduct in office the whole time she was the DA. A lot of people should be raising their voices, just like a lot is coming out in the recent days about Michael Bloomberg. It is far worse every time a story comes out about him. So this man supported stop and frisk, and he also supported redlining. So there's no doubt about it. The Democratic Party is also very white supremacist. No doubt about it. And it's sick that our people are still voting for the Democratic Party. I mean, if you're not going to do anything else, at least be independent and get away from Republicans and Democrats, because they have no track record of doing right by us. And that's not going to change as long as these folks are in power. It's never going to change. No, the Democratic Party is still the Dixiecrats. That's what they are. They're still the Dixiecrats of the past. There's no difference in the Democratic Party that we see today and the Dixiecrats. It's the same thing, same Jim Crow party. So the way I see it, the Democratic Party, they're the ones there, right along with the Republicans, they're keeping Jim Crow going in America. That's all they're doing. They're keeping Jim Crow alive. So thank you to those of you that gave the super chats. Unfortunately, WJ Luckett, thank you. And I know there was another one. I'm sorry, I cannot see these things when I'm doing both. Thank you, Overflown Enterprises. Thank you. And Rojo, thank you so much for the super chats. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, I know this one was longer than usual, and I'm not going to keep you any longer. But I thank you for coming. But I just want us to be enlightened about the Democratic Party. We have followed behind this party way too blindly all the way up until this time. And we need to take the blinders off and understand the Democrats hate us. They hate the Black community. This is why they will not give us reparations. They won't even make sure we get a fair shot in criminal court. They had ample time to make these changes, y'all. And they have not done it because they don't want to do it. There is no candidate in the Democratic Party that is worthy of the Black vote. They have not earned our vote. They have no plan for us. They have no reparations for us. All they want to do is take us down the same Jim Crow road that we've been on forever now. And that's no longer good enough. Until these candidates can show some tangibles, then they're not worth our time. There are many that will, like Roland Martin, that will tell you to vote. But what do we have to lose in these elections when we do vote? We're not gaining nothing. We're not gaining anything. Police brutality is worse than ever. We haven't seen one senator or one person in the Congress push any legislation to stop these cops from killing us. We have not seen them lift a finger. And they see all the shootings out here just like we do. These people are monsters, and they don't deserve any political office. All right, y'all. I'm going to conclude right there because, boy, I'm so fired up. I can ramble on forever, but I'm not going to. So, y'all, wherever you are, I know some of you are doing Sabbath, so Shabbat Shalom to you. And some of you are not Hebrews. So I'm just going to say, wherever you are in this world, please enjoy the rest of your evening. And we'll definitely come back together. I actually have some articles that I'm putting together to do a hangout, and I'll do my usual current events with a panel. But please enjoy the rest of your night. Peace, family.